Coming up on Influencing Entrepreneurs.
I did not know that car crashes was a leading cause of fatality for teenagers. The thing I love, right, is cars and my kids. John and James were killed in a car crash. And immediately I started thinking, well, I must be the most unlucky guy in the world. This could never happen to anybody else. And then I found out that at the time, it was around 5,000 teenagers every year were getting killed in car crashes.
After years of teaching entrepreneurship and consulting with multiple companies, I realized that when business leaders share stories of not only their successes, but their mistakes, it had a huge impact in the classroom. So I thought, why not document those stories? On this episode of Influencing Entrepreneurs, we'll hear from Doug Herbert, a drag race champion who took his love of driving and turned it into a nonprofit when he was faced with a personal tragedy. I'm Casimir Ward, and this is Influencing Entrepreneurs. All right, well, Doug, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with me today.
You did, absolutely.
So, a background in Nhra Motorsports. Tell me how you get into that.
Well, when I was a kid, like my dad was involved in drag racing, hot rodding, right? Hot rodding kind of started in Southern California. So my dad grew up in Southern California, and after World War II, all those guys got together and they wanted to go hot rodding. So the first drag races that they ever had were actually at Santa Ana Airport, at John Wayne Airport in Orange County.
And is this all sanctioned, or is this just
the group? First sanctioned.
The first sanctioned, okay.
Yeah, first sanctioned.
So I'm sure before it's sanctioned, the stories to be told there.
Yeah, the street,
Exactly.
At the end of the day, they want people to be safe on the roads.
Right.
So that's really why they started the drag racing. Is okay, let's get them up the streets, get them to a track, get some organization here and some safety going, and that was kind of how that started. So my dad was involved in those early drag races. Well, as I was growing up, I got to go to the drag races and see some heroes, the Snake and the Mongoose and Big Daddy and Shirley Muldowney, and like, wow, these are so cool. I want to race, I want to race them one of these days.
So how do you go? So you have this passion to be into racing, but as a kid you start working at a boat shop.
You got to pay for it, right?
Exactly.
First thing, right? So I'm like, how can I pay for this? So
no generational generosity of
No, my dad's like, So fast forward a little bit, when I turned 16, hey, my older sister, my dad bought her a new car, right? So here I turned 16. Hey, Dad, what kind of car am I going to get? And he goes, how much money you got? And I go, I got like $300 saved. And he goes, you get a $300 car. What? You bought my sister a car? Well, yeah, but you're a little bit different. You can make the money to go get the car, and I'm going to push you along to do it. And I was like, man, that's not fair. But what it did was it motivated me to get going, And so that was kind of what I did. But working at that boat shop, I really learned a lot. Started sweeping floors, but then next, that was what I got hired for, to sweep floors. Well, as a kid, right? I didn't know how to do anything. Then I started being the painter's assistant. And then I started being the rigger's assistant, the mold maker's assistant. So I kind of, after a couple of years there, I learned everything there was about the manufacturing part of it, which was neat, fabrication and
so in a small company like that, you get to play many roles, kind of see how the entire company works.
Exactly, really, yeah. Even involved with sales, right? Helping sales guys, to demo driving a boat, which, boy, that's a lot of fun, right? You're a young kid, get to go out and drive a boat. So I went from there, and then it was, working with fiberglass is kind of a pain, really. So I went to, I had an opportunity to go get a job at a hot rod shop. I was buying parts for this car that I was building, my $300 car, right?
Right.
So I'm going building, buying parts for this hot rod to get it going. And I saw Help Wanted in the window, and I'm like, Help Wanted, this would be a cool place to work, hot rod parts. I probably get a discount buying parts,
Right.
And so I ended up going to work at this hot rod shop.
Do you have a little bit of gravitas in the community just because of your father's?
The problem that I had there was sometimes the expectation was a little bit high, but then also the guys that were, around my age or even a little bit older weren't really around when my dad was racing. So there was the generation gap. It was like one generation missing in between. So the guy that actually owned the store knew my dad, and so that kind of helped me at the end of the day. But initially, it didn't.
There's no free lunch at this point.
Right, exactly, right. And so I worked at this hot rod shop for several years and really got to know that business. And eventually, the guy that owned the store, he owned about a dozen stores. He had a boating accident and lost his life in a boating accident. And so about that time, I made a deal with my dad. And he had a building that was empty that he was renting and the renter, you know, just one of those things where the renters cycled out. And I said, Dad, you got the building. Let's start our own parts business over here. You know, hot running stuff. Let's get back into it. Because he had kind of semi-retired out of manufacturing stuff. He was probably, I guess at the time, he was probably almost 60 years old. So he was, you know, he was winding down. He didn't want to get into all that, you know, going to work every day and working hard and all that. He'd already been through that.
So you grow up in this industry, seeing it. You have this dream to be behind the wheel, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of, you don't have your target set to where that's exactly where you're going to end up, but you kind of start falling into the peripherals around that. How does that start keying in to where you're going to end up where you saw as a child?
Well, you know, I knew where I wanted to go, but I had no idea how I was going to get there, you know? And so the hardest thing with this drag racing is having the money to be able to do it, you know? Right. It's, you know, there's some racers that are sponsored racers, right. So they've got other people supporting for, you know, promotional, you know, advertising basically. And then you've got other guys that are, you know, it's a hobby, right?
Yeah.
And they're spending the money on the hobby. Well, I didn't have enough money to be a hobby, and I didn't know how to get sponsorship, so I was just kind of trying to figure it out as I went along. So around that time, the business, you know, was growing, right? And this is back in the 80s. I guess we started doing the business in about 86 or 87. So then by the end of the 80s, you know, business is doing pretty good. So I actually bought a little dragster and was doing some racing, but just small time.
And it's more of a hobby at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you see your dream out there? Or are you just going to play around for right now?
Oh no, I knew exactly where
you
I
did.
wanted to go.
You still,
oh,
you
yeah.
are still super focused.
Oh,
okay.
I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't know how I was going to get there yet. Right. You know, so all I knew was, actually, my whole life. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. The only thing that I've ever done when I get bogged down and don't know what to do, well, let me just work harder, because every time I work harder,
yep,
it just, you know, just happens. You know,
right.
That old thing, luck. What's luck? Well,
right.
Luck is preparation and opportunity.
Yeah,
you know, and all of a sudden you make your own luck.
Right. Well, the way you're even telling your own story, you're kind of like, well, I stumbled into this job, and then I kind of, you know, you're kind of tripping your way there, but it also isn't by accident.
Right.
It's very
right
focused.
Place, and I was kind of, you know, around people that I needed to be around and so forth. And so, anyways, there in the early '90s, like 1990, I guess it was 1990. I had businesses has picked up pretty good now. I'm making some money. I decided, you know what? I'm going to go top fuel racing. You know, I'm going to go race Big Daddy. We're going to go do this stuff. And started doing that. And I realized pretty quick, okay, this is a full-time thing. And I'm not going to be able to beat those guys unless I'm doing that full-time, or unless I surround myself with some people that will enable me to do my business and they can run the racing part.
Right.
So kind of the first year or so was struggling to figure out that balance, you know, and getting some people in place that were going to enable me to be successful racing,
yeah, and
also continue to run a business that I needed to do in order to support the racing.
Right.
It was like, you know,
the chicken and the egg.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. And so ended up about that time I figured out, which is pretty easy to figure out, and most entrepreneurs and most successful business people figure out. You know, sometimes you have to do all the work yourself, but the best people are the ones that are able to motivate and inspire and get other people to see the vision about where we want to go and build that team to move forward. Because one person has a hard time doing that all themselves. I think that's the key, is number one, having the right people, picking the right people, and then making sure they have the same vision of going to, you know, whatever the finish line goal is.
Right.
So around that time, we started getting around the right places, the right people. And in 1992, I won the Top Fuel World Championship, and it was like, wow, you know, this is great. And
did it seem like it was overnight, or was it like a long fought battle to get there?
When I got there, it seemed like, you know, boy, that was a long year. This first year was struggling, right, you know, and then the second year was like, bam. So then all of a sudden, oh man, overnight, you know, but it really wasn't overnight. It was years in the making, and then one really hard year,
right,
that really motivated me to figure out, what am I doing wrong? You know,
right.
You know, it's racing, it's a business, it's the same thing, right? How do we get the right people in place? the right tools in place to make sure that we can be successful. It's racing business. It's the same thing.
So you win that championship. You kind of, you work hard to get there. Does the story end there, or is it boring at this point?
Okay. And so we ended up through the '90s winning 4 world championships. So it was pretty successul doing that. In the meantime, my business, I had some good people there that were building the business up, the racing parts business. And in the early '90s, my dad and I had a little bit of a tough period. I packed up and moved to North Carolina, which ended up being a really good move because North Carolina in the early '90s was every other garage had a race car.
Right.
So it was a perfect place to have being in the racing parts business. So that was a good move, and was pretty successful to right time, right place, same thing, do it, making a good move.
So I do want to get to brakes, but I getting to brakes, let's talk about that first sponsor comes in, Snap-on. Huge success, huge failure. And
well, it was 17 years. We were with them for 17 years, and it started out with nothing. It ended up being pretty good. It was a good. There was a good business partnership. I think I did. I gave them a really good return on investment for what they were doing. So it was advertising dollars, basically, is what it was. And I was giving them a good return on investment. So that was a lot of work, though. And
right.
It was constant, communication, and always telling them the story. Hey, this is what we're doing. Is there anything? What can we do for you?
Right.
What can this team do for you to help promote your products and get you into new places, or whatever, make your people happy.
So now you're running a branding sponsorship entire model in motorsports, and it ends up you end up starting a non-for-profit based around driving, based around safe driving. How does that come to be?
Well, so I had really no idea where I was going there. That was never my plan, never my intention at all. January 26, 2008, my 2 teenage sons got killed in a car crash. I did not know that car crashes was a leading cause of fatality for teenagers. I didn't know that. The thing I love, right, is cars and my kids. So just right up here in Cornelius, North Carolina, driving down Jeton Road, and they were going, they were being dumb, right? They were being teenagers. I was a dumb teenager before too, right? It just, the consequences weren't as bad, really, at the end of the day. So John and James were killed in a car crash, and immediately I started thinking, wow, I must be the most unlucky guy in the world. This could never happen to anybody else. And then I found out that at the time, it was around 5,000 teenagers every year were getting killed in car crashes. And I thought, I didn't know that. And what, driver's ed, I watched my son go through driver's ed, and it was kind of like, same, I don't know when you were in school and went through driver's ed, it was the gym teacher, right? You drove around the block, you picked up donuts, you picked up his dry cleaning, and it was like, okay, you're good to go.
Right.
I'm like, at the end of the day, I really didn't know nothing about driving. It was just, you were going to learn as you went.
And well, let me ask this. You're kind of dealing with this tragedy, and it's easy to feel, oh, I'm so alone. This doesn't happen to everyone. How long do you sit with that? Because that's very heavy on you, to where you start finding out these facts, and then where's the aha moment that you're going to do something about it?
John and James were killed on a Saturday morning, and on Monday morning, I went to their school. I asked the school, hey, can we get all the kids together in the auditorium, because I like to talk to them. And I got them together in the auditorium. I said, hey, all of you are going to drive. Some of you are driving now. Some of you are going to be driving. I want to do something and teach you all how to be safer drivers. I know a little bit about driving.
Right.
We're gonna teach you guys about being safer drivers. Yeah. And I didn't have any idea how I was going to do it or what I was going to do, but I knew about the same thing when I started out drag racing. I knew where I wanted to go. I didn't know how I was going to get there yet.
So you got this heavy burden on you, and your first instinct is, I'm going to talk to this group of kids to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, so like I said, the boys' car crash was on a Saturday. Monday, I talked to the school, and I knew that I was going to do something to make sure John and James' memory was going to live on.
Right.
And the thing that hit me that I knew that I could do was I could put some of my law enforcement friends together, my racing friends together, and we're going to teach them about being defensive drivers, right? About being safer drivers. So that was what we came up with.
And does this just start as an idea, as a presentation? Because I in no way are you at this point like, how can I make money off of this? You're just thinking, how can I make sure this doesn't happen to anybody?
Right. It was never about making money.
Right.
It's never about making money. All it was about right then was making sure that another one of these kids didn't die in a car crash.
Right.
That was really, that's all it was about. And I knew that I wanted to start, I had money saved for, to send my kids to college, right? Well, now they're not going to college. So I'm going to take my college fund money and I'm going to spend it to get this charity going so that I can help these other teenagers, their friends, teach them about safe driving.
And you even think about it at that point, like, we're going to do it as a charity built around these core concepts in this presentation and these safeties. When does it get big enough that you realize you need to start a non-for-profit organization?
Within a week or so, I decided, hey, we're going to have a charity dedicated to my boys that is going to do good in the community. And I knew that we wanted to do driver training, but maybe we're going to do grief counseling. I didn't know exactly what we were going to be best at, I guess. So I had to figure out what are we going to be best at. So towards the end of 2008, I put together a team to teach driver training.
Right.
And we were trying to figure out, what are we going to teach? Okay, well, let's go to DOT statistics. What's causing the car crashes? Yeah. So we knew there was a need for something.
Right.
We didn't know how to fulfill that need. So now we had to figure out, how do we fulfill the need? Well, first we got to identify all the problems.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what are all the problems, and then what kind of exercises can we do to train these teenagers to avoid those kind of situations. So really, that was kind of how it started out.
Hearing all of this, I got to admit, it's so inspirational, but there's a question in the back of my mind, because I think about me, because I don't think I'd be that strong. What are you doing during this time, especially that first 12 months after the tragedy, to take care of yourself? Because
well, working on this was therapy for me.
Okay.
That was my therapy.
Right.
Knowing that I had to do something to help these other. I didn't want another parent to get that phone call that I got that their kids aren't coming home. I didn't want any of my kids' friends die in any car crashes.
Right.
So that was what motivated me. It was like, I got to do this. I got to make something happen. That was my therapy, really. That's what it was.
So it starts becoming, within a year, it becomes this charity. How does it continue to grow? Because that's 12, 13 years ago already.
Yeah. So by the end of 2008, we held 2 training sessions, and we trained about 50 families, because I required the parents to come too, because I figured out pretty quickly that where do kids learn their bad habits? From the parents.
Yeah.
Because we're driving down the road and we're tuning the radio, messing with the GPS, hitting the kid in the back seat, all these things. Okay, parents aren't setting the best example. So I wanted to make sure the parents are going to come to the class with the teenagers. We're going to sit through a little ground school, and then we're going to take the teenagers with one set of instructors in a vehicle, and we're going to take parents with another set of instructors in a vehicle. So it's as much to help the parents as it is for the teenagers, but also it's a little bit of a bonding experience too. Typically parents drag the teenagers into the class because, they have to already have a driver's license, or at least be 16 years old and have some driving experience before they come. Because what we're not is a driver's ed. We're not driver's ed. We're life-saving skills in a car, and also making good decisions is another thing we talk about. Is how many teenagers have gotten in a car or been in a car with somebody and felt uncomfortable with the way they're driving. I've been in a car with people and go, whoa, I don't want to be in this car.
Yeah.
Well, we talk to them about, what do you do when you're in a car and you're uncomfortable?
Right.
Hey, you either step up and say, hey, I need to get out of the car, or you say, if you don't want to be that bold, you say, hey, I'm really feeling sick. You gotta let me out of the car. I'm gonna toss my cookies here. A lot of kids will say that. If they won't say they're scared, they will say, hey, I'm getting sick.
And you're dealing with a lot more than just driving. You're dealing with some of the hard decisions we have to make that is somewhat of a counseling. It's character development.
Right, exactly. Because I think about my boys, right? My older son was driving the car. I'm sure that my younger son was sitting there. James, he was scared.
Right.
But he didn't know, he trusted his brother. Well, that would have been a good time to say, hey, slow down, let me out of the car.
Right.
I mean, that would have helped. It would have helped both of them at that point. And so I try to get that point across to teenagers. Hey, making good decisions is a big part of being a safe driver.
Right. So at what point is B.R.A.K.E.S a company in and of itself, not just kind of a cause and a charity, but it literally is like your other businesses, your parts business?
So as it got going, it was just basically Doug spending money on this to get it built up and get it going, to accomplish the goal that I wanted to accomplish, which was making sure my friends, their kids didn't get in car crashes. That was really where it started out. So like I said, we trained 50 families in 2008, and I kind of thought that was probably, that was what I wanted to do. I trained my kids' friends.
Yeah.
That was really my goal. Well, I had parents calling me and emailing me and writing me and saying, hey, when are you going to do another class? I haven't thought about that yet. Maybe I need to do another class. So let's do another class. So in 2009, we did another class. And every time I trained 50 teenagers, I had 100 families telling me, hey, we want to come and do another class.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, okay, maybe we need to do another class. Well, then a friend of mine, Dick Pacer, well, at that time he was just my friend. He said, Doug, you've got an opportunity here. And by the way, Dick's son was killed in a car crash as a teenager. So we're in a club, in a group that we don't want anybody else to be in. So he had the same
And you
goal.
truly believe in your mission.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And Dick kind of had the background and experience in nonprofits and directing them. His daytime job was he was a CFO for Roger Penske. So he was a business guy, but he also understood philanthropy stuff.
Right.
And the cause of teenage driving was very important to him for the same reason it was to me.
Was this your first dive into philanthropy where I didn't know?
Really, yeah. Before that, I went to charity dinners, and you donate some money or you whatever, but I never understood charity.
Right. This is the first time you're really grasping the impact that those, I'm sure every dollar you spent in the past, you're like, oh, this is, this is how it's having a big impact.
I had no idea. I knew what charity was, right? You donate, right? You donate to whatever, St. Jude's, or you donate to, to good causes, right?
Right.
And they're doing some work that's good, so you donate some money, whatever.
So what kind of shocked you about that? Because it is running another business, but it is
so what I had to do, so in 2009, at the end of 2008, that was when I figured out, okay, I need to hire somebody to run this business, right? It was a business. It was a charity, but it was a business.
Right.
And,
just like you did in your racing.
The charity needed to be ran like a business because I'm busy, doing my racing, doing my parts business, doing my other stuff. I needed somebody to do this. So found a really talented guy that had, that his mother-in-law was killed by a teenage driver, a distracted teenage driver. So he had the right vision and ended up really helping getting this thing going. And I could put him with some of the other people that I knew. He had experience in running driving programs, which is really what now I kind of focused on. That was what we were going to do. We're going to do the driving program because all of the other things that we were trying, we were doing some grief counseling, we were doing some speaking events, we were doing some, safe driving, some videos, some tips and so forth. The most effective thing was the behind the wheel training.
Right.
And this guy that I hired had a lot of experience with those type of teaching classes, teaching behind the wheel training, whether it was racing or safety or whatever. So in 2009, there you go. We started. We ended up probably having, I guess, 6 weekends of programming, and we trained probably about 300 kids in 2009.
And now here we are, 12 years later. What has it grown to in comparison?
Trained over 50,000 families all around the country in 22 or 23 states. Now I have 2 teams that run, so we have 25 vehicles per team and about basically 30 contract workers, maybe 2 or 3 B.R.A.K.E.S employees that go to all these events around the country. So on any given weekend in 2 cities around the country, we're training drivers. And it's about 400 to 500 families we can train on a weekend.
Right.
So it's it's turned into,
Did you ever envision it would be this big?
No, I had no idea because that wasn't my goal initially.
Right.
I had my goal. My goal was only here. I wanted to train my kids' friends. And then my goal changed. I want to train every kid in the world.
when we all have tragedy, you know, people that lose jobs, they lose businesses, they lose spouses, family members, divorces, and all of that, we do all cope with a distraction. You know, like in your case, it was this therapy that you're doing to help other people. Now you have this program that's a huge success. Is there a point, like almost an awakening, a couple years later, 10 years later, that you've built this and you're revisiting, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened?
Yeah, you know, and about like my racing, there were just a bunch of different things that come on along the way. I had, because I guess it was in 2009, we only had the classes here in Charlotte. The National Hot Rod Association, the sanctioning body for drag racing, the president of the association called me and said, hey, Doug, the NHRA has a big problem because every time these kids are killed in a street racing accident, they call us and say, hey, what do you got to say about these kids that were drag racing and they got killed? And back to that thing with my dad, right? Back in the late 40s, they took the kids off the street, put them on the racetrack.
Right.
That was safety. And so NHRA was having a hard time getting that message across. So the NHRA asked me, hey, would you be our spokesperson for teenage driving? Because you can talk about that. You're also one of our champions. You're a winner. So you can talk to both sides, from the media, from a parent standpoint. And so then I'm the person talking to the media about these kids that were in car crashes and getting the media to realize, well, they weren't drag racing. They were street racing. That's illegal. That's what we want to do, is take them off the street, take them to the track, and go as fast as you can at the track.
Right.
But when we're on the street, we've got to teach them about being safer drivers. And that's where B.R.A.K.E.S ties into the Hot Rod Association. So that kind of rolled around, and the NHRA said, hey, we would like to pay the cost to bring B.R.A.K.E.S out to California and have some classes. So then all of a sudden, now we're not in Charlotte anymore. We're in California. We're in Los Angeles.
Right.
So, you know, and then one thing leads to another, and then, you know, we develop other partnerships with, you know, different people, and you know, continues to build up. And that's how we ended up now to train over 50,000 teenagers all around the country. One big thing, though, just about like being in business, is recognizing when you can make a move that will help going down the road in the future. So one of our board members on the charity suggested that we work with UNCC and get UNCC to analyze our data, because we were giving questionnaires to parents when they were leaving. So we had all the information from the parents and the kids, driver's license numbers, you know, age, when did they take the class. We had all this data, but we didn't really know what we were going to do with it. I felt like what we were teaching them was really good and it was helping them, but I didn't know for sure.
Right.
So we asked UNCC, Dr. Paul Friday over at University of North Carolina, Charlotte, hey, Dr. Friday, here's what we have. We need to analyze this data and figure out, are we collecting the right information from these families that are coming through? What do we need to do differently? And most importantly, is what we're doing, is the teaching that we're giving them, is it helping them? This is approximately 2015. So now we've got, you know, 5-6 years under our belt of teaching. He went back and analyzed 5 years of the driving records for these teenagers that we had trained, and then took DOT statistics from teenagers in the same zip codes, the same areas. Basically, they had the same training, except they didn't have brakes.
Right.
What he found out was unbelievable, that teenage drivers that have been through brakes were 64.7% less likely to be involved in a crash. Wow. You know, I would have been happy if it was 1%, but knowing that we're really helping these
making a
teenagers,
huge difference.
it was huge, yeah. And I didn't know, because I had people tell me while we're doing this training, oh, you know, you're making them more aggressive because you got these racing drivers teaching these teenagers, you know, about how to control a skid. And so the kids are out there getting more aggressive. Well, so I was a little bit worried,
right,
that this report might come back and
it
might say, hey, you know, the kids that you've trained are getting into more crashes.
Right.
And at that point, we'd have had to either stopped or changed what we were training or something.
But you cared enough to at least find out that answer. Rather,
yeah, I had to know, is what we're teaching them good or not? And if it's not, then we got to change what we're doing. At that first time I went and met the kids at the class, my boys' friends, I asked them, I said, guys, I need your help coming up with a name for this charity organization that we're going to put together here in memory of John and James. And so those kids took that, they took that challenge on. When I went back the next week to talk to the kids again, they said, "Hey, Mr. Herbert, we came up with a name for the charity." "Really, what do you come up with?" "B.R.A.K.E.S." And I go, "B.R.A.K.E.S, okay." And I'm trying to think about that. All right, well, that's good. B.R.A.K.E.S slows you down and all that. "Oh, but it's an acronym. Be responsible and keep everyone safe." And I was like, wow. So there's really a lot of meaning in B.R.A.K.E.S and what we do, because that actually came from the kids, came from my boys' friends. So.
Looking at your business background, all the way back to boating into B.R.A.K.E.S, what is kind of that, I'm going to call it stumbling, or, oh man, I wish I would have known that moment of running a charitable organization that you wish you would have known?
Oh boy, that's a hard one. I don't know. I'm not so sure, to be honest, that if I hadn't have been thrown in a position to develop this B.R.A.K.E.S program, that I would have ever had the understanding that I have about charities and how they work. I've been lucky enough to now know some people that have really done a good job educating me on a good charity and what good charities do, and how they're ran. Like I said, Dick Pacer starting there, Rick Hendrick, Felix Sabatis. I mean, they understand charities and how to make these charities make an impact, and how the money has to be spent in order to make the most impact, and to make sure that donors feel comfortable with giving money to a charity, knowing that it's not going to some CEO that's making $1 million or whatever, that it's actually going to help kids.
Right.
So that is, I don't know that I would have ever learned as much about it as I know if I hadn't have had to do it. It was just a goal. It was something that was thrown at me that I had to learn about, and I think that I don't know that I ever would have learned it, to be honest with you.
And probably from your previous experience, and probably even mistakes made in the past, you knew at this point, the things I don't know, I need to bring in the right people.
That's exactly right. That was the key. So at the end of the day, the key is surrounding yourself with the right people, and making sure the people that are surrounding you understand the goal. What is our goal here? And what is our vision? And how are we going to get there? And, it's not going to be a straight line. There's going to be changes. We're going to have to adapt to, rules and regulations. Right over this past year, how was B.R.A.K.E.S going to keep training teenagers with a pandemic? What are we going to do? We've got to change the way that we're doing it, or we can't hold classes anymore. So we've got, split up classes, one-on-one training instead of 3 or 4 kids in a car. So different things have changed, because you've got to adapt to, I think that's probably the best advice that I got. And I didn't know how valuable it was when I got the advice, but you can't stay the same. You've always got to be changing. Because if you're going to continue to stay the same, somebody else is going to figure out what you're doing and figure out how to do it better. Yeah. So you've always got to be changing. You've always got to be adapting. You always got to be figuring out how to do better, how to be more efficient, and how to, basically how to get the job done better.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, so, I can talk. We can talk for a long time more if you want.
Yeah. So no, I honestly, I have a million other questions. I actually didn't want to ask if you were going. I didn't know. So, are you? I didn't know you have another show.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Nexagy Education, or visit CasmoReward.com to catch up on previous episodes. And be on the lookout for our next episode featuring Maggie Williams, the owner and founder of Skiptown, a doggy daycare and bar in Charlotte, North Carolina.